All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for this WorkingX event. I hope you had a great time with our hosts, Max Hunter, and other invitees. So today, the session that we'll have and that I'll be presenting is about improving employee engagement by using artificial intelligence and smart surveying. Just to introduce myself as your hosts, I am Thibaud Martin. I am the general manager at Haiilo in France, as you might hear from my weird name and my accent. I am also the former founder and CEO of Jubiwee, which is a employee engagement measurement and insights tool. And Jubiwee has now become part of the Haiilo group and is now known as Haiilo Insights. So we'll have a few words on that later, but I have been in this space for almost 6 years now and have seen quite a few things in the industry and how it has changed. And I thought I would start with that. So I'm sure in the audience, a lot of you are experts in the domain, but I thought I would start with a few numbers about employee engagement as a whole and why it's an important topic to work on and to measure specifically. So just a few figures that I found and put together for the European Union, so maybe you know some of them, that I think are very striking. The first one is that 3 in 4 graduates don't want to work for a large company. So why is this an important number? Because most of our customers are either medium or large companies. And this number has changed drastically over the past, I would say, 5 to 6 years. And of course, it tells about your employer branding and about employee engagement as well. The second number is that over 50%, so more than 1 in 2 employees currently in the European Union are looking to change jobs. So it can be an active search, it can be a passive search, which is just being open to other opportunities. Obviously, it's a huge challenge for companies to tackle. And the third one, which is usually, what most people in the industry use as a hook to get the attention of the people who have the budgets and maybe of CFOs and the head of engagements out there. Employee disengagement is a huge source of costs. Numbers range anywhere between 12 and 16,000 euros per disengaged employee per year on average. So huge numbers that sort of explain why it makes total sense to be working on employee engagement and to try and improve on this number. So I have been in this market for 6 years now. And so I thought it would be interesting to explain to you how the market evolution has shaped in the past few years. So when we just started in 2017, when I came and saw prospects and potential customers, and I managed to book a 1-hour meeting with them to talk about employee engagement, how to improve it and how to measure it. Over a 1-hour meeting, 45 minutes were spent on the why. Why is it important to measure employee engagement? Why is it important to spend any time or money or any kind of resources really on improving it? And back in the day, it was a very different day. So it doesn't seem that long ago, but by then, the only businesses that were really interested in these topics were either businesses that have had very high convictions, a very strong DNA about improving employee engagement. So maybe some businesses that were very customer facing, and there was this idea of symmetry of the attention. So if of course you want to focus on the experience from your customers, you want your customers to have the best experience possible. So if you're customer facing, you need to offer a good experience for your employees. So these businesses sort of naturally lean towards these employee engagement topics. Other industries that were interested pretty early on in these topics were companies that had very high turnover, structurally very high turnover. So maybe consulting, auditing, insurance, banking, these kind of industries that have had high turnover historically, they understood that if you can decrease employee turnover by just maybe 0.5%, then it has a huge, financial impact on your company. And so the investment is obviously worth it. But besides that, most companies and most industries thought of employee engagement as, a nice to have. It's great to do it, but why spend specific resources on it? What do I get out of it? And it was mostly what we focused on. Now, fast forward to today, obviously things have changed drastically, and we are having a session, WorkingX session today, just about employee engagement. So of course, the wheels have been turning for quite some time, even before COVID. More and more industries and companies were starting to understand the importance of measuring and improving engagement. But COVID definitely put a very strong accelerator to it. And industries that were even very reluctant or not at all mature in tackling these topics, like heavy manufacturing, automotive, some retail, some specific departments in retail. Advertising, for some reason, like advertising industry was very not at all focusing on employee engagement. Governments, they've all come to terms on, we need to work on this because the context has changed so dramatically, and because they didn't really pay attention to it until a few years ago. They realize that the gap is very strong and they have a lot of competition on the market, and they need to sort of catch up on what they haven't done before and double down on employee engagement. And so now, if I take a 1 hour meeting with a prospect or a customer, it's going to be focusing much more on the how do we do it than on the why should we do it. And that's a very interesting market evolution. So again, if you have comments or anything, just feel free to write them down in the chat or ask them in the end. So I just have a quick question for you guys, because I want to know about your experience in your companies with what is still to this day the most used way of asking employees how they are doing in the workplace. It is the infamous annual survey. And I wanted to know what your experience is with this by a very simple yes/no question, which is, how many of you think that the annual survey is an effective way of improving engagement? And I am just launching the survey now. It should appear on your screens. And if you in Zoom, so if you want to answer that, just feel free. Wow, okay. Okay, the results are starting to even out a little bit. Okay, we got 16 answers out of, okay, so we're seeing that although it's getting a bit more balanced, it's roughly 70% of the people who think it's not a very effective way of improving engagement. 30%-ish think it's an effective way. So we've asked this question along the years. So I'm just gonna close the poll now. We've had this question around, just sharing the results. Throughout the years, we've shared this question to hundreds and thousands of people in all kinds of businesses, all kinds of positions. And roughly we have 75-80% of people who don't think it's effective. And it's pretty telling, right? So what I wanted to share with you is the top, so I'm not going to spoil it, the top 5 challenges that we've seen companies have when they say, okay, we want to work on engagement, but how do we do it? Like, what are the top challenges that these companies face? So let's start with number 1, which is the mere act of measuring engagement and of driving engagement. So you're a company, you want to work on this, you're convinced that this is an important topic, but it's such a vast one. It's such a vast topic. It encompasses so many things in your business, and you can start virtually from very different ways. Is it HR? Is it management? Is it top management? Does it come from the bottom up, or is it up, or is it up to the bottom? There's different ways to tackle employee engagement, and the number 1 challenge that we see is people wanting to, work and improve employee engagement, but not knowing where to start. The second one is due to the context more. It's okay, we've got this, obviously, COVID crisis. It changed the way we work. Maybe because a lot of our teams are remote, so it's not done for everyone, right? Depending on the countries, it's still very much ongoing. But you got a lot of people working remote. You got a lot of people who still need to do shifts, but you need to protect them against, the potential contamination on the workplace. So all in all, the interactions that you have with your employees and their managers has changed a lot. And it makes keeping in touch and feeling the vibe of the team very hard. And that's the second topic that we see is how do we tackle this? And how do we adapt to this new normal? The third challenge is, so usually the first reflex that you have when you want to work on employee engagement is you're going to ask HR or you're going to ask people in culture. And these people, let me tell you, they're very, very stretched at the moment. So I was at the Masterclass with Max Hunter a bit earlier, and I noticed that you were talking about the great resignation that is definitely ongoing. And what does that mean? It means that HR, right now, if you ask them what's one topic that you need to work on, they're going to tell you, well, it's hiring, right? I need to hire because I got some people quitting. I need to hire. So hiring, maybe some of you have done this before. It takes a ton of time, super exhausting, a lot of energy. And well, you can't do everything. So if you spend most of your time on hiring and training the newcomers, then you're going to have a little less time to spend on employee engagement. So HR and people in culture, they're stretched thin. The big focus right now is on hiring. So how do we get time to work on employee engagement when, well, every number shows that it is much more valuable for you as a business economically to keep your employees, right? So engage them and make them stay than to hire new ones and train them for the same work. Fourth challenge is that, okay, you have a survey, you are measuring employee engagement. Usually you do this with an annual survey and it's perceived as useless. So ask around, you ask your employees, 80% of them will tell you, well, okay, I have spent maybe 30 minutes or an hour answering your 100 question survey. I get it, but it's the same questions every year. It's the same questions for me and for my neighbor that doesn't do the same job. And then I never hear from it again. Like I'm spending a ton of time on this, and maybe a few months from now, I'm going to have one big company meeting that's going to explain to me, what the results are when I don't even remember what I said a couple of months ago and the context has changed completely. So it's seen as very inhumane and standardized and robotized, really. And the sad reality is that it's also perceived as usually inefficient and super expensive from the HR department themselves that set up these surveys. Well, expensive because it is, and inefficient because it takes a ton of time, resources. Just it's exhausting setting these things up, and you know in advance that you're going to have a bunch of consultants working around it and giving you some feedback about it afterwards. You're going to have a bunch of workshops, and then providing the feedback to your employees 2 or 3 months later and realizing it's not really what they expected. It takes a toll. And the fifth challenge is middle management. So middle management has a very tough position right now because, again, the context has changed, and keeping up with what your team is thinking is super hard. And so you can't leave them in the dark. And it's a huge challenge that we see most of our customers have, is that, okay, if you have maybe 1, 2, 3 people in your team, maybe you can sort of keep up to date and understand what's going on. But as long as you have 5, 10, 20, 50 people in your team, there's no way, even if you're the best manager in the world, even if you've got great wisdom and knowledge, there's no way you can know what's going on in your team if you don't have actual data, anonymous data, to back it up and to back the decisions that you need to make right now in the given context that you have if you want to improve engagement. So these are top 5 challenges. And what I wanted to do is that obviously we've got all kinds of customers and we've seen all shapes of approaches. Wanted to spend a bit of time on if you want to fix engagement, if you want to work on it, There's different ways you can do it. So what does failure look like? How do you know if you're going the right way? And what does success look like? And that's what I wanted to show you today. I see that there's a few questions in the chats. If you don't mind, maybe I'll read them through in the end, because it's I'm guessing it talks about different parts of stuff. So let's address them in the end. So let's start with, what does failure look like when a customer is trying to fix engagement, but it doesn't work? So the first one is actually just talking about engagement, right? It's the posture. It's saying, hey, at Visa Corp, we really care about employee engagement. We think it's great, and we think that's one of our values. But really behind it, there's no KPI. You're not measuring it, right? So engagement being just a posture and something that is not measured and publicly communicated to your team, that's probably the biggest mistake you can do, because, well, as an employee, there's nothing worse than thinking that your employer is a hypocrite, right? And it's just saying a lot of nice words to make them look good so that they can hire new people, but really they're not making anything to improve the situation internally. So I'm a former data analyst, and there's a saying in the business that you can improve only what you can measure. So the first thing that you need to do is obviously make it a KPI, communicate it publicly. This is how you can make sure that engagement is not just a nice thing that you're putting out there to do some great washing, but it's actually something that you work on and that you're ready to commit. Because if your numbers are public, if they're bad, that means you need to do something. You can't just say we're working on this and not do it. Second thing about what failure looks like, and it's very common. This one is very common. It's thinking that engagement, employee engagement, is an HR topic. It is an HR topic, but it's not only an HR topic, and you shouldn't have your HR team be the sole owner of this topic. Why is that? Again, HR teams, they're stretched thin, right? They have many things to do, especially right now, working on hiring. And so they can do everything. Second thing is that you've never heard, let me know if you have, but you've never heard anyone quit because they had a problem with their HR manager or HR team. People quit because of their immediate N+1, because of their local managers, because something's wrong in their team or in their company, but never because of the HR managers in their team. HR, they're a bit too far away to be everything and anything on employee engagement. What HRs need to do, and we'll get to that later, is empower local managers to work on engagement, draft the big lines of the politics, but not be, hands in the mud for every single team. You can't possibly be there and possibly tackle everyone's context all the time. So one thing that we hear sometimes when we pitch businesses that are not really ready to make the leap, sometimes we talk to HR and they say, our managers, they don't have time for that. They don't know how to do it. They're not really interested in employee engagement. Usually that isn't true. And usually that's actually something that managers really want to, look into. Third typical failure, I've talked about this before, the faceless static survey, right? So you take 1 hour to do a Google form, Microsoft form, SurveyMonkey. You got, you got your 100 questions, starting with which departments do you work for? How long have you been in the company? Blah, blah, blah. You don't have to ask all this. You don't have to ask the boring questions. You don't have to ask standardized, just the same questions every year to everyone all the time. Today, there are tools that can do this very intelligently and ask you the right questions at the right time, depending on what you've said before, depending on what profile you have, depending on how long you've been in the company. Just imagine as a consumer, you don't want to feel like a number, right? Well, employees are just the same. So the faceless, the static survey, what people think is that it doesn't matter, it doesn't change anything, and I'm just talking to a wall. And then the fourth typical trait of a failing engagement approach is thinking that managers see engagement as a core, as something that they don't want to do, right? And typically what the one sentence that we hear all the time is that you got the managers, you got the annual survey, and they're like, all right, people, so we have to take 1 hour to talk about the engagement survey. Like, people made me do this, right? HR asked me to do this. So we're going to talk about this, but really we all know this is bullcrap. We're just going to go over it quickly, and then we can get back to the real work, right? But nobody really cares about engagement. This happens all the time, and that's typical. And to be honest, it's not really the manager's fault. It's because the culture hasn't made them aware that it's actually their job and it's actually beneficial for them to be handling this. Now let's take a look at what success looks like. First one, as we've discussed before, is that engagement, it's a KPI, and it's a KPI that is tracked publicly and owned by top management. And the best companies that we've seen do this, they actually incentivize the bonuses of top management on the levels of engagement within the company. That means that they have an actual incentive to be working on this. Everybody's aware of that, and everybody can follow at any time what the metric is at any given point. Second thing is that in companies that are succeeding in their engagement strategy, engagement is everyone's business. So the HR role, or the people and culture role, is not to own everything, but it's to empower and to allocate resources so that local players can adapt their strategy to their context and their local team. And to also allocate resources so that the big picture stuff can get done and get the wheels rolling. Survey-wise, as we discussed briefly earlier, there are tools that allow you to not have just one static photographic approach once during the year, but something that's ongoing, because you need to have something ongoing, very short. You don't want to bother people. You don't want to have survey fatigue, which is basically when you're just so tired of answering questions all the time, you just click without thinking about what you're saying, or you stop doing it altogether. So you need to have surveys that are smart, adapting to your context, to your profile, to your previous answers, and artificial intelligence to understand open text questions. It's very tiring for people to provide to you contextual open text questions. So the least you can do is have an intelligent software behind it that helps you analyze large volumes and take specific actions, again, depending on your team. And then the last part, which I think is probably the most important, is making sure that managers use employee engagement measurement tool in their day-to-day. Like, it's literally every week they log in, and in 10 minutes, they should be, even if they don't have any training in data analysis, any training in HR, employee engagement, they should be able to identify in 10 minutes a week the topics that are most important for their team and how to tackle it. Again, so at Haiilo and Haiilo Insights specifically, this is precisely what we do. Our promise is the 10 minutes a week, exactly. So we make sure that employees just can ask the right questions at the right time to the right people. Just 4 or 5 questions. It makes sense. It's not the same as your neighbor. It makes sense to your context, to what you've done before. And managers in 10 minutes a week can understand what are the top priorities that they need to tackle, and what actions they should take specifically in their context to improve employee engagement, avoid turnover, absenteeism, and demotivation. That's it for me, folks. And now back to the question parts. I'm going to start by reading the chat, and then if you have specific questions, you can ask them out loud. Starting from the top. Right, so I think, Marco, you said, I think you can be part of the diagnostic and not necessarily improving it. Maybe we're talking about the annual survey. Am I correct? Right. So yes, actually what we tell our customers is that it's much better to have an annual survey than to not have anything at all, obviously. It can be a great way to measure what's going on at company level, right? And compare different aspects of the team. But it's definitely not enough. The temporality is not enough. The work that you need to put behind it is way too complicated. And the traditional aspect of doing it with consultants and paying hundreds of thousands of euros for one survey is just, honestly, it's a waste of resources. You can do something much more efficient with still an annual survey, but more on an ongoing basis, would be my take. The survey in itself is not effective, but how you use the results to take action can be effective. Absolutely. So everything is about what do you do with the results. So the input is how do you make sure that people are not tired of answering? but the output is what do you do with the results? And our philosophy, and actually the market is getting a pretty big consensus on this, is that it's much easier to do this step by step. So have smaller bites that you can tackle than have this huge action plan that, it seems so big that you don't even know where to begin. You don't know where to start on to improve on this. And so I think the format of having smaller surveys makes it easier to take actions behind it. Okay, so from an employee point of view, the most frustrating point about surveys was that they changed nothing. At least I felt this way. For every new employee hired, an existing one disengages. Absolutely. So again, cost of disengagement, a cost of keeping an employee engaged is much lower than hiring someone and training them. And absolutely, the frustration is usually around not having anything done besides that. So that's why you need to make it a day-to-day philosophy, something that weekly managers can touch base with their team transparently. So it's got to be anonymous. I mean, actually, there's two schools. I think anonymous is better because people can actually speak their mind. Depending on the cultures, we've got many different cultures in the US, in Europe, and in the different European countries that we work with. And some of them, there's really this open feedback culture, and you can say whatever and it's fine. In some companies or in some countries, it's a bit harder. So the anonymity makes it easier maybe for people to speak their minds, right? So question, touching upon Marco's comment. Thibaud, what is your experience on surveys? Do they really change nothing, as Marco puts it? Are the results left untouched by managers and there is no follow-up? So I would say, if you've got this big survey once a year, it's a bit discouraging for managers. So because you've got so much to do, and you know that you're not going to be able to measure the results of your actions until next year, until the next survey. So think about it like you have to make this big presentation for work, but it's for 1 year from now. It's a huge presentation. It's 1 year from now. How discouraging is that? You don't want to get started on this. You want to sort of do the day-to-day, do your immediate tasks, and then when you don't have any choice, maybe you're going to work on your presentation. Versus if you have every week one slide on a specific topic where you got people's input and you want to work on this, it's much more motivating. So this is sort of the philosophy. You can involve local management a lot more, and you can have people just tackle and get more done throughout the year than versus having just one big survey overall. One question from Daniel. What would you recommend? Surveys all at team level and higher frequency, or also at company level, and at team level are managers in charge of their own survey? So you need to have both. You need to have company level surveys that allow you to compare departments, compare teams, stuff that concern anyone. So on maybe the company culture, maybe on the new strategy, something that really everybody's focusing on and cares about. And then on team level, it's going to be the local topics. What about the new tool that we just implemented? What about the new hiring process? What about this business that we've just acquired and are integrating within our department? How does that impact your day-to-day? So these are the questions that should be owned by local management, and they should be definitely the one to own, create the surveys, and provide feedback about this. And there should be someone at company level, from central, that sometimes need to take a look and make sure that the questions are formulated the right way, that people are still happy. And you need to mix these. So you need to have maybe 1 week a survey at team level, 1 week a survey at company level. How important is it to train self-reflection skills for the employees and managers to come up with own insights on engagement from their standpoint? It's very important. So typically when we work with a customer, we have, I would say, 30 or 40% of our work at the beginning is on training the teams, onboarding them, not on the tool, because the tool itself is honestly dead simple, like anybody can use it, but more on the philosophy behind it. First of all, making sure that employees don't see the surveys as sort of a surveillance mechanism, like, oh, I want to know how well you work, but as something that's made to improve their work, their day-to-day. And that's the way that it's supposed to be intended. So you need to communicate on that. Second thing is being very positive. So it's okay if there are stuff that are not working that well in your team. It's okay if you have some disengagement on specific topics. Everyone does. you need to see this as an improvement opportunity and not as a grudge that is held against you and that top management is going to make you responsible afterwards. So that's something that you need to train your team on and ensure to them that the culture is on improving and it's not on pointing fingers. Is it possible and helpful to use Haiilo Insights before introducing communications platform in order to receive a clear picture of the employees' needs, which then they can translate in the platform architecture? Yes. So basically there's, thanks for the question, Julia. So there's two case studies. Case study number one is measuring engagement as a whole. Case study number two is measuring the appetence of your teams on specific topics, gathering feedback, and measuring how the transformation, so the stuff that you're implementing, is affecting their well-being and their engagement. So it's definitely a way that you can do this. Usually when you have a big transformation or a big project coming up, you want to measure before, take feedback, during, how is that impacting your day-to-day, and after, to see how far you've gone and how you've improved. I see that it is time to leave you. If you have any questions at all, happy to answer them. I'm going to write in the chat my email address. And thank you very much for attending and for all of your questions. It was great having you. Take care, everyone.